Alrighty. Hello, everybody. My name is Jackson Footit. I am the retail manager over here at Fossil Creek Nursery. Today, we have all joined together for our seed starting class. And it is a very pressing time of year, very important time of year to do the seed starting class just because now is a great time to start some of your seeds inside, start thinking about your garden beds outside, everything that's going on just throughout the season. You want to kind of have a plan for, or else things could get overgrown, things may not survive. You just want to make sure that you kind of have all your ducks in a row. So, to begin here, I'd like to talk just a little bit about seeds in general. Now you are totally able to buy seeds instead of plugs, instead of these little starts, and it is actually a very satisfying experience. In fact, I would say that it's one of the best ways to plan ahead. I know that if I walk into a garden center, a nursery, and I during May and it's super busy, and all the starts that you want are gone, the tomatoes are all gone, the peppers are all gone, you can't find what you need, then seed starting is a great way to kind of combat that, to again get your plan started. Now, seeds will always come in little packets like this. It will tell you, of course, the type of plant, how to sow it, how to plant it, everything like that. If it needs transplanting, if it needs to be started inside. On top of that, seeds have also a lot of legally required labels on them. For example, each seed should have a little sign at the end that says the packed for date. Now, you want to make sure that you're buying seeds on the year that it says. If not, then, well, the germination rate will go down. You may not have as many plants as you're looking for with that seed packet, and also it is not legal for nurseries to sell you plants that are past expired packed by date. Now, after we've kind of gotten this general seed out of the way here, I would like to start talking a little bit about indoor versus outdoor sowing of some of these seeds. Now, a lot of people around here, especially in the Front Range of Colorado, will start their seeds inside because we have a very, very variable spring. We always have a last frost date, which is considered to be the safest time to start plants outside because you don't have to worry about seedlings or new leaves getting nipped by hard freezes or snows or anything like that. So, there are specific plants that are better to start inside. They will actually get some height to them and will perform a lot better once put in the ground after that last frost date. Some of those, of course, would be like your peppers or your tomatoes, all of those really warm season crops. Of course, there is a ton more, as well as some of your herbs are nice to start inside. However, there is also direct sowing outside. And those actually, some of them you can actually start a lot quicker than you may believe. For example, lettuce, kale, arugula, what else am I thinking of here? Broccoli, cabbage, things like that. I have actually, and you could find these all over the internet, when to plant sheets. Terrific and super helpful if you're unsure if you have a cool season vegetable or flower, or if you have a warm season vegetable. Looking up some of those when to plant lists are very helpful in just deciding what you should be doing from there. Now, going back to those cool season crops, starting them inside is nice because, again, they get some height to them, they get their first true leaves out, and then you can eventually you can directly plant those into your garden bed outside. However, because the weather here is also so variable, a lot of these cool season crops in the next couple weeks can actually be directly sown outside into your garden beds. Kale is a terrific one for that. Again, broccoli, lettuce, cabbage, all of those really tough-leaved plants, vegetables that can actually take some snow load on them. In fact, there are several coworkers here, and I've met a lot of people that after they've directly sowed their cool season crops early on, then they will actually be able to get a harvest or two. And really, this is a great time to start either inside or in a couple weeks start outside those cool season crops, because once we get into June, July, August, those super hot, those super arid months, it's going to be a lot more difficult to continually harvest off of those plants. For example, if you plant kale right now into the ground or inside, you might be able to get a couple harvests off that before we really start kicking off the season. And that is due to our 50, 60-degree days in the middle of January or February. They get a chance to grow. And once they get to a certain height, once they start to harden off and form true leaves and start to build a rosette, or, whatever type of foliage that cool season plant will get, they're a lot less susceptible to freezing or having any damage or snow. They can take snow load a lot better. So cool season crops are a terrific way to go. Now going into a little bit about the warm season crops. Again, those are going to be like your tomatoes, your vegetables, any beans, peas, carrots, corn is another one. These are ones that you can start inside, but they're not meant to be inside for a long period of time. Let's take tomatoes, for example. Great plant to start from seed, fast growing. I love to start them inside because they are just terrific, and they are just exemplary growers. They a lot of time will produce a lot more fruit if they are started inside, because if you start some of your warm season crops, again, I'm going to list them off: peppers, carrots, beans, peas, tomatoes. I think I already said peppers, but you know what I mean. Things like that. If you start them inside, they get a chance to have a root system and to actually put off some growth, so they will perform better once spring actually hits. It's warmer out now. You take the plant that you've already been working on, put it out there, you're going to get yield a lot faster, quicker, and you actually end up with a healthier plant. Now, after we've kind of talked about the different plants and when to start those seeds, either inside, outside, or whatnot, I'd like to talk a little bit about how to actually start seeds inside. Now, seeds, I'm going to use this for example again. Many seeds that you will purchase at a garden center or nursery don't require any kind of cold. They don't require any kind of scarring on the seed to germinate. Most of them you can plant directly into a tray or into a pot. Keep it watered, keep it humid, and keep it warm, and it'll just pop up on its own. You don't need to, unlike some bulbs, you don't need to provide any conditions, again, like keeping it in a cold location for a long time, or damaging, scarring, or cutting the seed at all. Now, the best way to start seeds, especially if you're doing a whole lot, you're starting a bunch of vegetables, a bunch of flowers, a bunch of herbs, the best way to start it is going to be using a seed tray, much like this. Now these are also called bedding trays, but essentially you want to get all the cameras here. You want to fill up your tray with a very high water holding media. You want to hold as much water in that media as you possibly can, because seeds need to imbibe, meaning they need to take in a bunch of water for them to break open. And then from there, they'll of course put out their first roots, put out their first little leaves, cotyledons, and then grow from there. And unfortunately, the best water holding medias for trays like that are going to be what I would consider the less organic ones. Now, it doesn't have to be. Of course, there are organic medias of all different kinds, but the main ingredient that you want in your seed starting mix is sphagnum peat moss. Peat moss is a terrific additive in medias and in really anything that you buy at the garden center, at the nursery, is going to have some peat moss in it. It is such a great substance because it can hold water. After it has been wet, it will stay wet, again with that holding of the water. It is also, it has a ton of surface area as well, so it will stay wet in that way. It's not like gravel or sand in which water will just flow through it and it won't hold any of that water. I actually have a bag of it right here. Stagnant peat moss. This is a Fertilome product, but there are many other companies that will sell just peat moss. But this is great because it is something that, again, will hold water, but will also allow water to drain through it. On top of that, it doesn't have any of the wood chips in there. It doesn't have any of the organic material that it would actively break down. Because if, say, you took the soil from outside, or if you took a very organic media that had, again, a bunch of wood chips, a bunch of organic matter, eventually those are going to start to break down. And they break down because fungus will begin to deteriorate it. It's going to try and eat it. And that can cause problems for you later on. Because once all that organic matter starts to break down, the fungus will start to grow. The mycelium, which is the part of the fungus that is actually breaking down these things, will start to colonize around the seeds and can sometimes end up dampening them off, meaning that they're just, once that little seed produces its first root and leaves, it'll just die right off. And generally that is caused by fungal issues. So starting your seeds in a mix that is very high in peat moss, maybe only having a little bit of perlite here and there, would be the best way to start things. Nothing's going to be actively broken down, you're not going to have any fungal growth on there, and you're going to have some healthy seedlings to start. Also, I would like to say that there are other factors. There are other factors to successfully starting these seeds. A good mix and a good tray. Again, nice bedding tray and a nice high peat moss mix are great to start. But that's only the housing and the media of starting seeds. A lot of seeds will need a specific temperature to start germinating, to start growing. And especially our warm season crops like tomatoes, peppers, they need to be warm and wet in order to start their process. So many people will opt for buying a heated mat that is, of course, electric powered, and that is something you can place directly under your seed tray, and that would, of course, expedite the germination of any of your seeds that you're starting. Now, we have the correct tray, we have the correct media, and we have to make sure that we're keeping it warm. And keeping it warm, on top of using the heated mats, you can also, if you don't have one, if you don't want to go out and buy one, if you have a west or south facing window, which is getting a lot of heat, radiating a lot of heat, a lot of lights coming through, you can just take your seed trays and put them right there. Alternatively, if you have a really high-powered grow light that radiates a lot of heat, that would work as well. But you just want to make sure that you're keeping any of your seeds, your seed trays, away from drafts or any air conditioning, just because you want it to be as warm as possible. And that would also help deter fungus as well. Fungal spores like to germinate when it is wet and cold. So if you're providing a wet but very warm area, it does not give that fungus an opportunity to really start to colonize the media. And of course that is backed by using a high sphagnum peat moss mix. Now from there, we have our tray filled with a good high water holding yet very well draining mix. You have either it next to a window for heat, have a heat mat right there. From there, you want to increase the humidity, because humidity is going to be great for starting a lot of these plants as well. In fact, starting seeds in the greenhouse is the best way to go. Any little plug that you see at a garden center, at a nursery, was started in a greenhouse, because they don't have to use the heating mats. They can if they so choose. They have high light, they don't have a lot of pests or issues in there, so starting seeds in the home can often incur more changes to the process. But anyway, we have our tray, we have the media, we have the either next to a window or we have a heated mat for it. Now we're talking about humidity. Usually when you're buying a tray like this, it will come with a hood a cover much like this one. And that is easily, hopefully, attached to the top of your tray. And essentially what you're doing is creating a little greenhouse in your own home. The hood of this is, of course, clear, allows light to pass through, and it will stop any of those, any water vapor. It'll stop any heat that's being released by the plant during respiration. It will capture all of that and keep it in that little area, of course, making your own little greenhouse. So we got our seedlings. We figured out what we're gonna plant. We have our tray, we have our media, we have our heat source, either from, again, outside from the window or a heating mat, and then we have our hood on top of that, which is keeping all of that water in there, increasing humidity. It's also trapping heat. It's also just keeping everything happy in there. Again, creating a little greenhouse. Those are going to be the best ways to start seeds inside. Of course, that is inside. If you want to talk more about outdoor sowing, it can actually be easier in some respects. If you're directly sowing outside, some plants would actually prefer that. There are a bunch that just don't do as well if they are started inside because the transplant shock is too much. A lot of your cucurbits, they're all in this cucumber family. Of course, there's going to be like your gourds, cucumbers, of course, zucchinis, pumpkins, things like that, would prefer to not be transplanted. They prefer to be directly sowed out into the garden. This can actually get you more fruit. It can get you a healthier plant. And a lot of times, if you're starting seeds inside, if you're taking something like that and putting it out into the garden bed, into the full sun, you might have some burning on the leaves. Now, there are a ton of plants that don't have that issue. Again, tomatoes, peppers, lettuce, kale, broccoli, all do very well just directly sowed indoors and then can be transplanted out. But again, reminding you that a lot of those plants in the cucumber family may not do as well if they aren't directly sowed outside. I'm going to close the notification here. There are a ton of different ways to go about it. I mean, I am only suggesting the peat moss because I have used it many times before. It's been tried and true for me. However, there are other mixes. Like here's a black and gold seedling mix. But the key in any of these mixes is to just look at the ingredients. Because if you can find that whatever mix it is has a high peat moss, maybe some perlite in it, then that's all you need. That's what's going to prevent the fungus because there's not actively decaying organic matter. That is what is going to help hold water to start your seeds. That is what is going to be the best to use. Now, I believe that is going to do it for just like vegetables overall. Herbs are very similar though. You can start them inside. Of course, you can start them outside as well. Many herbs like mint and thyme are just very easy to germinate and very easy to start growing, either or. And I mean, not only that, herbs can sometimes be great pollinators too. Of course, like your basil and your oregano and, like I mentioned, the thyme. Once those start to flower, of course, that's not what you're looking for to eat, but for helpful pollinators, that is terrific. I mean, if you want to attract bees or butterflies, you can plant some of those herbs, and those would actually be very beneficial. And taking some of your vegetables, planting them next to your herbs, can actually help pollinate some of those vegetables. For example, cucumbers, they need to be pollinated in order to fruit. You need to have two plants. And if you introduce some herbs or flowers into that garden bed, they can actually pollinate each other. You're attracting bees, and then they'll jump from your herb flowers to your vegetables and then help you actually get fruit there. So there's a bunch of different ways and a bunch of different symbiotic events that would be very beneficial. I believe that is pretty much what I had here. I would love to open it up to some questions. If you guys had anything, feel free to enter it into any of the chats that I have here. Oh, I see a We Love Fossil Creek from 14 minutes ago. I really appreciate that. I had a phone that was covering that up. But does anybody here have any questions about seed starting? Would you like me to talk a little bit about cool season versus warm season crops? Or herbs, vegetables by chance. I'm just going to go ahead and give everybody a minute if they have any more questions just to enter them in now. Doesn't look like I'm getting too much here. No worries. Oh, do sunflowers do well transplanted? Terrific question. Peggy, I will get to your question about tomatoes here in just 1 second, but I got a question about sunflowers here. Sunflowers do okay transplanted is what I'm going to say to you. That is something that I would actually directly sow outside just because they are such vigorous growers. They take up water very fast, very well, that a lot of times starting them inside may not be the best way to go. Because if you have a seed tray like this, it's fairly short. Once that sunflower starts growing, it will already be taller than this hood can hold it well before the growing season even starts. So I would suggest to plant sunflowers directly into your garden bed because they take the sun very well. Again, they're very heavy drinkers of water and will just perform well directly sown outside. I'm going to answer Peggy's question here. What is the best time to start tomatoes and peppers? Is that now? And that is a terrific question. Yes. Yes is a great time to start tomatoes and peppers inside. They need a couple weeks to about a month before they're actually ready to go outside. Our last frost date is May 10th this year. Now, I wouldn't say that is set in stone at all. Of course, things are very variable here, but now is a great time to start tomatoes and peppers because you can lay them out in the tray, wait for them to germinate, and then they will just gradually get bigger inside as the season progresses. Around May is a great time to actually transplant them out. And like I mentioned earlier, tomatoes and peppers are very good transplanted vegetables. So great question. Yes, it is a good time. I'm going to jump back over to this one. I have a question here. Suggestions for starting surface sown long germination time seeds. I usually get algae on the top, but I also need to keep them moist enough. Surface sown long germination time seeds. That is a great question as well. What I would probably suggest to you would be to, especially if you're starting it with the hood on, you want to take that hood off periodically. Get some airflow in there and prevent all the water from just sitting on top. Having proper airflow into your greenhouse is a very important thing. If not, then algae is something that will continue to pop up for you. Another thing I would suggest would be when you do water those seeds that are going to take a long time to germinate, I would water a little bit less over time, especially if you are using a hood like this, a cap to your pot or tray, so you can get adequate airflow in there and prevent the buildup of algae. On top of this, I would also keep it in a very sunny, very well heated place too. So we're keeping it in a, let's just say, west or south facing window. You get to open up that hood, I would say a couple times a week just to get some airflow in there. Watering a little bit less every time that you do have to water. You don't want that entire media to be just drenched and soggy. You want to just get a light dusting. You want just enough moisture that the soil feels wet but not sopping. But that is a terrific question. And if you have any specific plants that you're suggesting for the surface sown long germination, I'd love to be specific about that. Jump back over here. I have another question about herbs. Herbs, please. I can't seem to get lavender growing indoors from seed no matter what I do. And it will be difficult to grow lavender inside from seed. That is one that requires very specific germination rates. and actually will do better in a little bit cooler condition. The classic lavender is going to be, of course, English lavender is a good one. And of course, if it's from England, that is a very rocky, very overcast, kind of a wet area. And not only that, but a lot of the varieties of it are much harder to start indoors. And that is because it'll eventually become more of a woody plant. The leaves on it are very thick. They are difficult to really be productive inside. My suggestion for lavender for you would be I would try and start them inside, but once we start getting warmer temperatures, I would move those outside because they're going to do a lot better with the airflow. They're going to do a lot better just in general because they can take the sun like crazy. And putting them directly outside where we have that high UV, we have that high heat, we have a lot of airflow may be the best way to go about it. Another thing is that the germination of lavender may take a little while. They're not super quick to germinate. So starting them indoors, keeping the seeds in the tray, but then periodically bringing them outside would be the best way to go about that. I have another question here. When should I start zinnia flower seeds? That is another great question. You can start them now, or you can hold off for a couple weeks. If you start them now, you can transplant them a little bit earlier, and you'll have them flower a little bit earlier. But it would be just fine to start them in a couple weeks as well. And that is because zinnia are, again, one that can take the sun very well. But they also would prefer to have some more airflow and more of that just direct. It definitely is not you. Have more of that just direct sunlight, direct heat. And they are consistent flowers too. They will flower throughout the season, especially if you deadhead. So, which of course is picking the dead flowers off once they die back. But yes, you could start zinnia seeds now. You're not going to get a whole lot over the next month, but if you start them now, at least you don't have to go buy starts at a garden center. You have that satisfaction that you did start it now. So yes, you definitely can. Doesn't look like I have. Does anybody have any more questions here while I am still rocking and rolling? See what I got. Looking good. Of course, no worries at all. Thank you for asking the question, participating. I really appreciate it. Let's see. I'm going to give everybody another minute here, but I believe that's pretty much all I got for the seed starting class. Again, the idea is that we're just trying to create a little greenhouse. We want a media that's not going to have a lot of organic matter that can break down, that can cause fungus to start. We want to keep that media wet, but not sopping wet. If you have some long germination crops, like the question we had earlier, make sure that you're opening that hood every once in a while to get some airflow going. If you don't have a west or south facing window, you can buy heating mats or grow lights that will help start these seeds. And then, of course, we began it with talking about the cool versus warm season crops. Cool season crops, kale, lettuce, arugula, cabbage, even some chard too, are sometimes good to start here in a couple weeks, even outside, because you can get a couple harvests. Cool season crops will do better in the end of winter, beginning of spring, because they will die back in the middle of the season. And then finally, we talked about the warm season crops, which, like vegetables, like tomatoes and peppers, which are good to start inside and transplant well. I got another question here. What are the easiest flowers to start indoors? I heard zinnias. Do you have any other suggestions? Zinnias are a really good one to start indoors. You could also let's see, marigolds are good to start indoors. I would also suggest something like celotias, or celotias, people call them different things. They have these really cool, like almost furry like flowers on them. My goodness. Some of the cosmos are good to start indoors. Nasturtiums are great. Boy, what else might be good to start indoors? Some of your osteospermum, those are really nice too. There are a ton of possibilities. Morning glories is another good one. Oh, geez, even snapdragons, alyssum, really any of those. I would say, except for like sunflowers or lavender, like we were talking about, any of the very fleshy and very warm season flowers are great to start indoors. Something cool season like a pansy, I probably wouldn't, because honestly, that time is pretty close to past because they are such a cool season flower. Violas are the same. Those would be better to start earlier indoors or to even directly plant outside because they are so cold hardy. But I'm going to list a couple of those off again. Your marigolds, your alyssums, morning glories, nasturtiums, even calendula is a good one. All those are good to start indoors. Well, alrighty. Anybody have any last questions here before I head off? Of course, thank you very much for participating and asking the question. Always happy. Always happy to answer. Okay, I got one more question here. Anytime I start tomato plants inside, their stems are always very thin and weak. Any advice to make them stronger? That is a great question, and that's a problem that a lot of people have. Tomatoes, on top of requiring heat and humidity and light, high light, will also need airflow, like we've been talking about a couple times in here. But tomatoes specifically, they won't develop a strong stem unless they're subjected to airflow. They need to rock back and forth. This is much like trees in general. Trees, if they are continually staked all their life, will have the same size trunk all the way up the tree. And that is because they're not subjected to winds pushing them back and forth, which tells the tree that it needs to be stronger at the bottom and taper up. Tomatoes are very much the same way. You need to be able to add some sort of wind, some air current around your tomatoes to give them a strong stem and to make them a little bit shorter and thicker. And that, coupled with high light and high heat and even watering, is going to give you a very strong, thick tomato. Terrific question. Alrighty, giving another minute here, see if anybody else has anything. Yeah, tomato question, that was a good one. In fact, I mean, that tomato question was very good because that's something that we experienced here at the nursery last year. Of course, thank you. We started tomatoes and we didn't subject them to any air currents, and they ended up being essentially the same size stem all the way up, and they were getting kind of leggy. So that is something that I actually personally discovered last year. But again, great question. If that is going to be it, I believe that I'm going to go ahead and head off here. Looks like it. I really appreciate everybody for stopping by, taking some time out of your day to talk about seed starting. If you have any more questions at all, feel free to contact our social medias or to call the store directly. That might be the best way to get in touch with me or any of the experts here. Of course, again, thank you everybody for showing up. It's been great for me. Anytime I get to talk about this stuff, I love it. So I hope everybody has a great day. Good luck with your seed starting, either indoors or outdoors, and have a wonderful day.